overwhelming. A deep, unrelenting sadness overshadows your days, and you wonder if you will feel whole again. There is hope and healing from a reproductive loss. Call the International Helpline, 866-482-LIFE, and talk with someone who has been where you are. Your call is confidential. 866-482-LIFE.
Every single member of this institution should join us in condemning the president's racist tweets.
Characterizing an action as racist is not in order.
I was just going to give the General Speaker of the House if she would like to rephrase that comment.
I had cleared my remarks with a parliamentarian before I read them.
The chair relies on the precedent of May 15th, 1984, and finds that the words should not be used in debate.
She is Speaker of the House. She can ask for a meeting to sit down with us for clarification.
These women of color were the first ones to attack me, label me a token, simply because I choose to vote based on policy and not my skin color.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
And good Wednesday, everyone. Fred Jackson sitting in for Brian today as our fearless host makes his way to the West Coast. Hey, that rhymes. Our fearless host making his way to the West Coast. Jeff, I think you've been telling people that Brian is making a big move.
Yeah, he's on his way to Washington State, and he will be... after 2 weeks of a break, he'll be back on, the 29th?
29th, yeah.
If all goes well, and setting up a studio in his house there in Washington State.
Hey, listen, I lived on the West Coast for a while. That is not a hotbed of conservatism out there.
No.
I don't care where you are, Washington State, Oregon, although we have a station or two in Oregon.
Yeah, Grants Pass.
And then you get a little bit below Oregon, and then you're into San Francisco, and goodbye.
Yeah, but that's kind of in Brian's personality anyways. He kind of reminds you of the guy that would that stood in front of the tanks at Tiananmen Square.
Yes.
You remember? That's kind of Brian's personality.
That's Brian, anyway.
He likes a good fight.
I think it'll be a good time out there. We're happy for Brian because he's going to be closer to family.
Exactly.
It's going to be a good time. And so a week from next Monday, Lord willing, he'll be back on the air. In the meantime, we'll try to keep house for him and keep you informed as to what is going on. Hey, listen, there's a whole pile of stuff going on in Washington over the last 24 hours that we're going to be talking about in just a few moments. But I wanted to tell you about a story that is broken in the last 24 hours that you probably didn't hear because of everything that's going on in Washington, D.C. And this has to do with indictments against members of the MS13 gang. The indictment by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Los Angeles charges 22 people linked to a subset of the MS13 gang. Now, it's a long story, and I'm not going to read it all, but they are charged with numerous murders. Maybe put it this way, gruesome murders, machete murders. And they are suspected of nearly 200 crimes, these individuals in several states, over 9 years, according to this indictment. Now, this is the point I wanted to bring to you. If you look at the Associated Press story on this, they wait until the very last of the story to mention that the vast majority, 19 of these individuals, entered the country illegally. Now, what has President Trump been saying? All you see on the stories and the mainstream media about what's going on the border is these poor folks, they're being kept in detention centers, and you hear allegations of kids in cages and people drinking water out of toilets and all of this sort of thing. The president has been warning about this now for more than 2 years. that we are facing a huge problem on our border. I was just listening before coming into the studio, an interview with, I think it's a Mr. Switzer, who was part of the original task force that was put together to go after the MS-13 gang. They are the most ruthless, most dangerous group of people you would ever want to imagine in this country. Now, this is what he said. You know, in those caravans, and again, the pictures that you see in the nightly news, it's just these poor folks looking for a better way of life. He is saying these MS-13 gangs mix themselves in with that. This is exactly what President Trump has been saying, folks. So 19 of the 22 charged in multiple murder cases all entered this country illegally. Most are from El Salvador coming up here. You need to be aware of this kind of thing, folks. This is the side of the story that never gets told. In fact, was looking at some of the headlines. You can believe, why you can't believe this. The headline of the story, The Border Today, is the latest Trump administration move on the border is causing confusion. All right? So President Trump is being blamed for causing confusion because the latest move on the border is this, folks, that if you're coming up and claiming asylum and you pass through a country, a third country, all right? So you're from El Salvador or Honduras or whatever the case, and you pass through Mexico, then you can't waltz up to our border and say, I want asylum. You got to stay where you are and make your claim. In fact, you should be doing it from your home country. And by the way, it isn't just folks from South America, Central America. It is folks from all over the world. Here's what they're doing. They're flying to El Salvador from Pakistan, from Yemen, from all over the world. And then here's what's happened, folks. It's basically because of the Democratic Party advertising out there and our mainstream media, the system is being gamed like it has never been gamed before. You want to know what's causing the crisis is that these people all over the world have been told, all you have to do is show up at the U.S. border, the southern border right now. You say a few words. They're given cards by associates, some of them of the ACLU. Here's the words to say, and the government is under obligation to let you in. You know, I don't even know why people are bothering to climb over fences anymore, because all you have to do is show up, say a few words, and you're in. And you go to these detention centers and you wait for a hearing. You get a hearing and you're told to show up in a year from now. And guess what? 80% of them don't. So this is why we're saying there is a crisis on our border. You will remember just several months ago, Nancy Pelosi was telling the world there is no crisis.
A manufactured crisis.
A manufactured crisis. That's what's going on our southern border. And then you have the squad. AOC, Omar, Tlaib, and Presley telling the world just the human rights abuses going on our southern border. And it's all Donald Trump's fault. That's what you're being told. And these folks know they have the mainstream media on their side, and they just continue the lies. Folks, be aware of this. Now, what I did just before coming into the studio, I put a story on One News Now. Most MS-13 gang members indicted in California are illegals. Go ahead and read that. Like I say, I don't want to read on the air some of the description of the murders. These are brutal, evil people. I mean, they're killing people of rival gangs. I mean, this is the kind of thing that's happening. Just like this story said. They are suspected in nearly 200 crimes in several states over 9 years. Some of these people indicted were not even California. Some of these MS-13 people are in Oklahoma, for example. They're spread right across the country. You've heard President Trump say this over and over again. Doesn't get a lot of attention, but that's what our authorities have been doing. Those folks arrested last weekend when you heard so much about the ICE raids, folks, what was going on there was they were picking up people who have already been deported by ordered deported by the courts, but they're skipping out. So they're picking these people up because they've already committed other crimes. So let's be very straight about that. And it is despicable the way the mainstream media is misrepresenting these stories. And like I said, in the AP report, buried in the story was the fact that 19 of the 22 indicted were in this country illegally. Well, the bad guys are being assisted to a certain extent by the narrative coming out of Washington. And of course, yesterday, you had the charade in the House yesterday afternoon and yesterday evening. Nancy Pelosi coming to the podium and introducing a resolution accusing the president of basically being a racist. That's the way it was put, in connection with what he had to say about the squad, and which has been misrepresented, the exact quote. He's just saying these individuals, they hate this country, members of the squad. Why don't you go to other countries, correct the problems there, and then come back and show us how you did it? So here's what happened last night. This is kind of interesting. Pelosi gets up to make the resolution, uses the word racist, and what you're going to hear is Nancy Pelosi. You're going to hear Republican Congressman Doug Collins saying you can't do that according to parliamentary rules. You can't use a term like that, racist, against an individual. And then you have the House Chair, a Democrat, Emanuel Cleaver, getting really upset with all of this, throwing down the gavel, leaving. And then you have the voice of Steny Hoyer agreeing with the Republican that what Nancy Pelosi had done and referring to the president as a racist is wrong. Cut number 1.
Every single member of this institution, Democratic and Republican, should join us in condemning the president's racist tweets. To do anything less would be a shocking rejection of our values and a shameful abdication of our oath of office to protect the American people.
I was just going to give the General Speaker of the House if she would like to rephrase that comment.
I have cleared my remarks with the parliamentarian before I read them.
I made a point of order that the gentlewoman's parliamentarian and request they be taken down.
But we don't ever want to pass up, it seems, an opportunity to escalate. And that's what this is. I'll dare anybody to look at any of the footage and see if there was any unfairness. But unfairness is not enough because we want to just fight. I abandon the chair.
Characterizing an action as racist is not in order. The chair relies on the precedent of May 15th, 1984, and finds that the words should not be used in debate.
That was Steny Hoyer's voice there. Remember, he's a Democrat. He is second in command to Nancy Pelosi amongst the Democrats. He agrees with Congressman Doug Collins, Republican of Georgia, who said she was out of order by using that word. Now, here's the question I had after that. Nancy Pelosi says, in response to Collins, well, I ran my resolution wording by a parliamentarian, and he or she said it was okay. Steny Hoyer, fellow Democrat, gets up and says, no, that is wrong. So did Nancy Pelosi not run it by a parliamentarian? Or did she pick the wrong parliamentarian? I tell you, folks, the discourse, you heard Congressman Emanuel Cleaver of Missouri there. Maybe he's the former mayor of Kansas City, someone mentioned. But he's disgusted with the wrangling going on in the House. Well, who is creating this wrangling? Everything that President Trump does is attacked as being racist or some other derogatory term. Everything that he does, whether it's trying to secure our southern border, whether it's trying to improve the economy, but it's identity politics over and over and over again. And I guess according to House Chair Cleaver, you Republicans should just sit down and let the Democrats make all kinds of charges against you and not say a word, and then we'll have peace in the House here. But he says this right after Nancy Pelosi gets up and calls President Trump a racist. But that's okay, according to what Cleaver had to say. There's going to be wrangling because we have a great, deep ideological divide in this country. And right now, amidst of all of this, is the reality that the Democrats face a huge problem with the so-called squad. We're going to be talking about that when we come back right after the break. You're listening. Fred Jackson sitting in for Brian Fisher here on Focal Point. Much more ahead, including the debate in the Democratic Party about what to do with universal health care. We'll be back in a moment.
O Timothy, guard what has been entrusted to you. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. Jaylene Hinkle is the top left defender in U.S. women's soccer, but she wasn't on the World Cup winning national team. The Irish Times published the headline, Religious Clash Leaves USA's Best Left Back an Observer of World Cup Bid. In 2017, Hinkle rejected the invitation to join the national team for a pair of exhibition matches after learning the players would wear rainbow-themed jerseys to celebrate Pride Month. Hinkle hasn't been a part of the national team since. She said, it's very disappointing, but the peace that comes from obeying God trumps the disappointment. She sacrificed the World Cup to follow Jesus.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Dr. Richard Land, President of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. Last month, we commemorated one of the most momentous moments, not only in American history, but in human history. On June 8, 1789, 230 years ago, U.S. Representative James Madison of Virginia introduced a list of proposed amendments to the newly ratified U.S. Constitution. In fact, this was the first Congress elected under that Constitution. These amendments, when finally adopted and revised, became the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, known as the Bill of Rights. In doing this, Madison, the father of the Constitution, was fulfilling a campaign promise. When the new Constitution was being proposed, there was fierce opposition to replacing the Articles of Confederation with a new Constitution by Patrick Henry and Thomas Jefferson. Why? They feared too much federal power and were particularly concerned about a possible federal state church under the new government that would discriminate against nonconformist believers, as official state churches were doing against citizens in 9 of the original 13 states, which had such official state churches. As a result of the Great Awakening, Baptists had become one of the largest denominations in America, and they were adamant defenders of religious liberty and opposed to any government-sponsored religion. So, they were going to vote against the Constitution, assuring its defeat, until the most famous Baptist preacher of the era, John Leland, met with James Madison in a 3-hour meeting in Orange County, Virginia. The meeting resulted in Madison promising to amend the new Constitution when the new government was established to protect religious freedom, and Leland promised to get the Baptists' vote for ratification. They did so in overwhelming numbers. They made the difference. Leland delivered on his promise, so did Madison, on June 8, 1789. Tune in tomorrow for the rest of this dramatic story. For more information about SES, go to ses.edu. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
And we are back on this Wednesday edition. Fred Jackson sitting in for Brian. We've been talking about the squad, AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. As we say on today's issues, we have to mention her full name. We're starting to assume that everybody knows what we're talking about when we say AOC. As I think Eva Tagliano says, it is not a condition. It is a person. Although she brings certain conditions now to the Democratic Party. But she is joined by Congresswoman Tlaib and Omar and Presley now, and they're known as the Squad. And, of course, they've been in the news lately, upset with what President Trump had to say about them back last weekend. But also they've been in the news in that they are taking on House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. There's a lot of tension between the two. And it was in full display again this morning in an interview the Four did with Gayle King on CBS. Now, what you're going to hear is Gayle King interviewing members of the Squad, AOC, and also you're going to hear the voice of Congresswoman Tlaib of Michigan. And I just want you to listen carefully to this and catch their attitude towards House Speaker. Now, these are all freshmen members of Congress. Nancy Pelosi, whether you like her or not, has been around a long time. That's why she's House Speaker. But listen to their attitude towards Nancy Pelosi. Cut number 2.
Are you speaking to Nancy Pelosi?
Our teams are in communication. Our chiefs are meeting.
But shouldn't it be a face-to-face? I want to know if you are speaking.
She's the new member, not the speaker.
No, but I want
She
to
has
know.
every right to sit down with her in any moment, any time, with any of us.
Yeah.
She is Speaker of the House. She can ask for a meeting to sit down with us for clarification. The fact of the knowledge is, and I've done racial justice work in our country for a long time, acknowledge the fact that we are women of color. So when you do single us out, be aware of that and what you're doing, especially because some of us are getting death threats, because some of us are being singled out in many ways because of our backgrounds, because of our experiences and so forth. But I think
Alexandria,
the question
are you interested in having a conversation face-to-face with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi?
Why wouldn't she sit down with her?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and we've reached out to that end.
Reached out to that end. You notice what she said there at the beginning? Our team is meeting with their team. So we now have 2 teams in the Democratic Party, and the squad has negotiators to meet with Nancy Pelosi to try to iron out their differences. And then you hear Congresswoman Tlaib basically say, hey, is Nancy Pelosi's obligation to come to us to ask us to have a meeting? So this is what's going on, folks. And some people say that perhaps President Trump knew exactly what he was doing the other day when he raised the profile even more of the squad in making them the face, ideologically speaking, of the Democratic Party heading into next year's election. Some say if it was deliberate, it was brilliant, because once again, it makes them, and they are the radical left of the Democratic Party. So if all of this results in President Trump showing these 4 as the face of the Democratic Party as we head into the election next year, I think he has won the case. Because they're also fighting within. And it's not only Nancy Pelosi, there are many Democrats. Heard one being interviewed on a noon show on Fox just a few moments ago. And it was a woman of color who's also a member of the Democratic Party in the House. And she is fed up with the squad. They're getting all the attention. And she said to the host of Fox, well, why don't you focus on some other things? And the Fox host said, well, these 4 keep calling news conferences and inviting us to go and listen to them and condemning anybody who doesn't listen to them. These 4 are taking the spotlight away from anything maybe the Democrats want to achieve. It's going to be really interesting, folks, to see how all of this plays out. Well, another point of divide in the Democratic Party is amongst the 24, if I got that right, 24 Democrats that want to be on the top of the ticket next year for as president. If you asked me to name them all today, I could not. So we've invited our good friend Chris Woodward in from American Family News to talk about one aspect of this. Joe Biden is still out front in the polls, but he's trying to, I think, distance himself, Chris, a little bit from the rest of the pack. Many in the rest of the pack want Medicare for all, et cetera, et cetera. Right. In fact, they put up their hands. What was it when they were asked not too long ago, Medicare for illegals, and everybody put up their hand.
Right.
Some of them seemingly reluctantly. But right now, like Bernie Sanders, I think, is coming out today to try to sell Medicare for all, his plan.
Right.
Biden wants the country to buy into ObamaCare 2. We'll call it that.
Right. Yeah, this could be a Biden care if you wanted to go that far. And the reason being is because, as he says, he wants to promote and expand Obamacare. And the way that he wants to expand Obamacare is to include everything that's currently available, plus the option to get a public option plan. This is a government-backed plan that would be put on the exchanges for people to shop and choose around with. And the idea behind a public option is that it would create some competition amongst the private insurance plans and therefore drive down prices. We actually have some sound here, clip 1 of Biden, this campaign ad.
I believe we have to protect and build on Obamacare. That's why I proposed adding a public option to Obamacare as the best way to lower costs and cover everyone. I understand the appeal of Medicare for all, but folks supporting it should be clear that it means getting rid of Obamacare. And I'm not for that. I was very proud the day I stood there with Barack Obama and he signed that legislation. Never before had anyone ever been able to do that in the White House.
Now, he mentioned there, I understand the appeal of Obamacare, but folks supporting that need to come forward and admit that it would mean getting rid of everything that's currently available. And that's probably why Senator Bernie Sanders, the independent who wants the Democratic Party's presidential nomination, is coming to the defense today of his Medicare for All plan. Bernie says, and I quote, "I have helped write and defended the Affordable Care Act, but you know what? Times change, and we have got to go further." Biden says this is a step too far. This is a step too far. I'm offering you a choice. Bernie is saying you got to get rid of what you have and go with the Medicare for All plan, which is it brings us to a humorous turn of events, and I'll go into context more in here. Let's do clip 3.
How many of you have, when you were working, liked your, and you may still be working, many of you, how many of you like your employer-based health care? Did you think it was adequate? Now, if I come along and say, finish, you can't have it anymore. Well, that's what Medicare for All does. You cannot have it, period. Number one. There's a hiatus spot in between, by the way, how long it's going to take. So I give people the option. If you like your health care plan, your employer-based plan, you can keep it. If, in fact, you have private insurance, you can keep it.
Now, where have we heard that before? You know, there is an argument to be made that he was saying, you know, look, Medicare for All is going to mean you got to get rid of everything and go with Bernie's plan. But in my plan, I'm going to give you the option. You'll have a choice. And if you like your plan, you can keep it. But, you know, his boss, Barack Obama, said as much and turned out to be a complete lie. A lot of people had their plans they chose, they wanted, they liked, taken from them because they didn't meet, they weren't up to Obamacare's regulations. Other people that liked a plan, bought it, all that stuff, they didn't qualify for the taxpayer subsidies and had no choice but to get rid of the plan because they couldn't afford the skyrocketing premiums and deductibles and out-of-pocket expenses as a result of Obamacare regulations.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've heard this before from your administration. You know, a lot of people, I think, are taking Biden to task for that. I wonder, like, what talking point did the Biden campaign choose over when someone said, let's go with that? Because they know people are going to say that's a bad idea. I did talk with Dr. Merrill Matthews of the Institute for Policy Innovation, and he told me that, you know, Biden's kind of in a tough spot here. Clip 2.
The vice president is in a difficult position faced by a lot of former vice presidents who served in under a previous president when they're running for office. And that is, how do you distinguish yourself from your prior boss, the president, while at the same time saying that there were things that were wrong and need to be improved? And so what he's coming out is, if he went to a Medicare for All, it would look like he thought Obamacare was a failure. By what he's doing, instead of saying, let's make Obamacare better, let's improve it by fixing some of the problems that are there. So he's put in a kind of a stopgap to try to help some of the problems that he perceives is facing Obamacare, and in the process hopes to gain some moderate Democrat votes who feel like going to a government-run healthcare system is just too far.
Now, you know, it's worth pointing out here that some Democrats were in favor of a public option, that government plan to put out there alongside the private insurer plans. Some Democrats were in favor of that 10 years ago when the law now known as the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare was being written. But there was a kind of a divide at the time saying, listen, we don't need the government saying this is the plan. That's too far. And here we are 10 years later, and you've got people like Bernie Sanders saying, we got to do more. We got to do more. You got a human right. One of those things.
That's pretty good.
Thank you. So, you know, that's where we are. And if you're curious, Biden's plan, he says, would cost $750 million over about 10 years. And again, that's from somebody running for office. Okay, so it's probably more than that. And reports vary as to the cost of Sanders' plan, the Medicare for All plan, but it's more than $750 million, it's safe to say. I've seen headlines putting the price tag in the billions and even the trillions of dollars range. How would Bernie pay for this? I mean, there's an Associated Press story to this effect today. Sanders has said taxes would increase on middle-income earners.
Yeah.
Not just the wealthy that he has an issue with, but everybody listening to the show pretty much would have to chip in to pay for this Medicare for All thing. Now, in all fairness, people would be paying taxes to support BidenCare. But, really, the thing that nobody is talking about, and this, I think, is something that we should hear more from, is the lack of a plan, really, from the GOP. We heard from these people for years that if you put us into office, we're going to get rid of Obamacare. Then they got put in there. They had the opportunity for a year and a half-ish with President Trump, and they couldn't get their act together and agree on what exactly it is. And one of those big issues involves the fact that some Republicans are in favor of Obamacare regulations. We're going to make sure that nobody can get denied based on a pre-existing condition, or people 26 and under can stay on mom and dad's plan, things like that. Some people, like it or not, right or wrong, whatever, have an issue with those things because their argument is that's driving up the cost of insurance. And I think, to be honest with you, this issue is far from over. I'm glad, I'm honored that 10 years into working here, people still bring me on to talk about this stuff. But it's not going away anytime soon, that's sure. That's for sure.
Well, one of the problems I always have with the proposals that have been put forward by Barack Obama, Obamacare, and now many of the candidates like Bernie Sanders talking about Medicare for all, and now Joe Biden talking about Obamacare too, basically, is all of it involves the government playing a much heavier role in your life. And at some point, we know, as you kind of pointed out generously, that people in government tend to underestimate programs, get the program in and say, oops, it's costing more than what I thought. And that's what's going to happen. But also the whole idea of socialized medical care. People who have listened to American Family Radio know I come from Canada, and so I lived with socialized medicine for a long time. And what they don't know is that there are limits put on how much money is spent.
Right.
And that results in, for instance, hospitals shutting down because you can't afford all the hospitals that you had. So you have to go to other places to get medical care. Socialized medicine means doctors have a cap on how many patients they can take.
Right.
So the whole idea that you can keep the doctor that you want, which turned out to be a lie from Barack Obama.
Right.
That's the case, and it wouldn't change. When the government gets involved in something, it's always going to cost more than what they say, and it's never going to work to the benefit that they claim it will.
Right.
It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, and we've already seen, and we've covered this in the newsroom, there are continuing reports on how we continue to have less and less babies. So let's say, hypothetically, we do go with a single-payer or universal health care, Medicare for all, whatever you want to call it, plan. At some point, we're not going to have enough people working to pay into a program like that. And then you have to wonder, well, what's the government going to do to start paying the bills then?
Yes.
There are big concerns. And I've heard every argument from all sides on this. Canada has one and England has one. Why can't we? Americans do have that we can do this too kind of attitude. We can do it better than other countries. I get all that. But there is no way that you can take a country of 360 million people and say, we're going to do the same exact thing that a country with a population the size of California's, that being Canada, we can do the same thing they can do. Yeah. It's just, there's no way. Single payer, universal health care, it works great for people of my generation, the millennials, Generation Z, those that are going to follow us. But for seniors, it's a big problem. It is a state of fact that older people have more health issues.
Yep.
And they have to go to the hospital more, and all of a sudden it's going to be ration care because of single payer.
All right. Well, Chris, we sure appreciate you watching this. It is going to be a big issue during the election campaign, and people need to know the facts. That's the bottom line in all of this. But you're right. We need to hear what the Republicans are going to say about it, too.
Yeah.
What is the alternative to all of this? All right, you're listening to Focal Point. Fred Jackson sitting in for Brian today. Much more ahead. Lots of news coming out of Washington and around the world. We'll deal with that when we come back.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
The Medicare administration wants doctors to accept monthly payments for each Medicare patient rather than payments for actual services provided. These are called capitation payments, and they'll encourage rationing of care. Doctors will be financially rewarded for not ordering tests and not doing procedures. President Obama once said the 100-year-old woman whose cardiologist said she was too old for a pacemaker might be better off with a painkiller than surgery. Thankfully, another cardiologist gave her a pacemaker and she did well. Lump sum monthly payments will lead doctors to limit care for those deemed too young, too old, or too disabled. This is one more reason to find a direct pay doctor who works only for you. Go to jointhewedge.com.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly E-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
There's a lot happening around us. That's why Christians need to stand strong on family values and morality. Hi, I'm Ray Rooney, editor of The Stand, a blog from the American Family Association. The Stand has timely, carefully written articles on relevant cultural issues that you can quickly forward to others. The Stand is a beacon of light to a society in need of direction. Visit afa.net/The Stand.
AFR's own J.J. Jasper is a morning on-air personality, author, comedian, Christian, and family man. J.J.'s also a keynote speaker at banquets, men's ministry events, pregnancy center fundraisers, and more.
This is Penny Weaver from Decatur, Illinois. Last year, we had the privilege of J.J. Jasper as our speaker. We had our largest fundraising banquet ever.
Information on J.J.'s availability to speak at your event is at jjjasper.com.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I was finishing undergrad and got credit cards because I couldn't work full-time. So that started the credit card journey for me.
If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
And then when I got married, we combined our credit card debt and it became impossible to pay off on our own. At that point, I was like, I don't know where to turn. And then I found Trinity.
Trinity will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, reduce your interest, and possibly improve your credit score. You'll save thousands.
I initially was scared to call, and immediately I felt relief. I mean, in a matter of 3 years, we've already paid down $20,000 in credit card debt, which is huge.
Call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
And we are back to Focal Point on this Wednesday. Fred Jackson sitting in for Brian today. Hey, listen, there's a Reuters Ipsos poll out today, and it was taken just in the last 48 hours or so. And it's basically asking people how they are responding to the whole feud between President Trump and the Squad, and the charges going back and forth of racism, et cetera, et cetera. Very interesting. This poll says amongst members of the president's Republican Party, his popularity has actually gone up 5 percentage points in the last couple of days. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah. So that's his base. Now, it's going to be interesting to see, and there'll be polling done, I'm sure, throughout this week as to where people are coming down on this. That's our question to you folks today, 888-589-8840. 888-589-8840. How did you read the president's charges against the Squad, those 4 members of Congress? And, the charge is that he was being racist. But some people are saying he was basically pointing out the ideological divide, the political divide in this country, and that these 4 women represent what their policies, what they want, what they are saying about where they want to take the country is to the radical left side of things. In fact, as we have seen, they are more radical left than even Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden. So, where do you come down on this? 888-589-8840. 888-589-8840 is the number to call. Is it a good play by the president? Some have said that perhaps what he's trying to do is make those 4 the face of the Democratic Party. Will he succeed in that? 888-589-8840. Now, regular feature here in Focal Point is the Reed Report, correct?
Yes, that's and we have some good news today.
Well, that is always good.
Yeah, people may be familiar, much loved advocate for people with disabilities and many other things, many books, radio and stuff. She just announced on Facebook that she was now cancer-free. She had been going through a very aggressive type of cancer, and she is emphasizing the miraculous, of course.
Yeah.
It is actually a miracle. She was really in bad shape, and she is completely cancer-free. So she wanted to thank everybody for lifting them up in prayer, and for now we've been spared the battles of cancer. And Fred, you and Brian know a little something about that. That's not an easy thing to go through, but she has remained in the faith and remained strong, and now is a witness to answered prayer.
Absolutely. Johnny Erickson Tata is an absolutely incredible individual.
Yes.
What she's gone through,
Yeah, exactly.
People know a little bit about her story. When she was a young girl, diving accident, left her in a wheelchair as a quadriplegic, and yet is a woman, when you see her, and I've had the opportunity of seeing her at some of the NRB, National Religious Broadcasters Conventions, et cetera, she lights up a stage.
Yeah.
She really does.
Yeah.
She's absolutely, when you talk about seeing the glory of the Lord, you see it in her face.
Amen.
She is tremendous testimony. Back some time ago, she was diagnosed with cancer, but that is wonderful news. Today.
She also said that, and this is a quote from her, "We humbly realize that this battle may change in the future, but for today, for now, we are rejoicing in those wonderful words from my medical oncologist." How do you say that?
Oncologist.
Oncologist. All clear. Those are the words that she heard. And she concluded by saying, "Upward and onward."
Upward and onward. Great lady. Beautiful voice, too. Writes books. Is a speaker, beautiful voice. I mean, God has given her so much talent, and I tell you what, she is, folks. When you think of feeling sorry for yourself, find out a little bit about Johnny Erickson Tata, and you'll say, "Shame on me," because this is the lady and it's ongoing. So praise the Lord for that. That is great news. Thanks for bringing that in. All right, our question today is where you stand with regards to President Trump and his battle with the squad, and to a certain extent with the Democratic Party. And so let's go to our phones. Let's go to Texas first, and Leah is on the line. Leah, go ahead.
Hello. You were asking what people thought. I think President Trump is wonderful. We need someone who would stand up against the kinds of things that this squad is the things they're saying and doing. And you know what? It really, I just thought of this morning, and it's probably pretty obvious to everybody, but I will tell you what crystallized in my mind about this whole thing. Bottom line, the truth is not being proclaimed. And Jesus said, "I am the truth." And they are people who will not embrace the truth through our Lord that we go to for we know that He is the ultimate truth, and it is so true that they are pushing against the truth and fabricating their own stories, and they are so detrimental to everyone, to all Americans. And I thank the Lord so much for President Trump, who will fight against
the lies, the terrible things that are coming from so many segments, so many different fronts. And he did not deserve this label that they put on him, that Nancy Pelosi spouted in Congress and was rebuked for it yesterday, well, in the House, saying that he is racist, because it's been pointed out, and I wish someone would do it very loud and clear over the airways so that everybody could hear. Of course, not everyone would accept it. He wasn't talking about race at all. He was talking about the fact that if you don't like our country, you don't have to stay here. We're not keeping you in. As a matter of fact, I wish you would go and find a country that you are happy with if you're not happy with what we've offered you here in this country. And that they should be appreciating the things that they've received, especially Ilhan Omar, who was accepted as a refugee and given asylum, given safety, given, I guess you could even call it the prosperity that she's experienced, and even to the point of being able to be elected to be a congresswoman and speak her untruths. So,
well, Leah, I think a lot of people agree with you. I just mentioned that poll. And of course, here's part of the problem too. And Leah, we thank you for your call. Here's part of the problem too, is that we have a mainstream media that is willing to continue the distortion of the facts. Let me put it that way. Continue the distortion of the facts. When you read the stories that they put out about this, very often they don't even quote anybody. It is just the reporters saying they agree with the squad. And so they carry on this narrative of President Trump being racist. You know, it's very interesting. There was a woman interviewed this morning on Fox and Friends. Her name is Lynn Patton. And, she has worked for President Trump for many years and is part of his administration right now. And she's an African-American woman. So to say that the president is racist is just nonsense. And she said she's known him for years, not a racist bone in his body. And our caller was exactly right. The race card is thrown in when the real problem, the real difference is in their vision for the country. The squad has a vision for this country that is radically, radically left. President Trump, his theme going back to 2016, is make America great again. Make America strong again, and not dependent on other countries. Make America strong again and reduce the tax burden on them. And he's consistent with that. That's what he is trying to do, secure our southern border. You know, the things that he has not been able to do, it's not because he didn't want to do it. Yes, it was a high priority of his in the 2016 election to secure our borders, but remember, Congress is the one that controls the purse strings, and they denied him the money to do that. They claimed there was no crisis on the border. Now they claim there is a crisis and that it's his fault. So that's the hypocrisy that we're seeing. All right, let's continue with our calls. Let's go to Sean in Michigan. Go ahead, Sean.
Yes. Hey, about the president's comments. I originally thought it was poorly worded, but I supported the essence.
Mm-hmm.
And I deliberately follow all sorts of minority MAGA on Facebook and Twitter, and I found it very telling just to open up Facebook on my phone and see all these blacks and Latinos saying, "Hey, if you don't like it here, get out." So that's a real eye opener, and that's why I deliberately do that. Yeah. And we need to look at the background of these four horsewomen women, because Ilhan Omar's dad was a indoctrinator trainer, in Sudan, and Ocasio-Cortez. She's literally like an actress playing a part. She was hired to run as a congresswoman, and they control her. So that these things should not be happening. I really have to criticize my GOP leaders here in Michigan because they didn't even run anybody against Rashida Tlaib. So that's really all I got. Thank you.
All right, Sean, we thank you very much. He's exactly right. There's a lot you don't know. It's very interesting. We did a story back a few days ago. Remember, there were stories leading up to last weekend that ICE was going to do these raids. Mm-hmm. And there were a lot of people in the Latino community that were very upset. We interviewed a pastor, a Latino pastor, who told us that it was really interesting when the Latino community, these congregations were told the truth of what was going on. That ICE, it wasn't the Democrats described it as this big sweep of everybody Hispanic in the country who they suspected to be in the country illegally. No, he said when these congregations, Latino congregations, were told that what they were after were people who have committed other crimes since entering the country illegally, have already been ruled that they should be deported. And the congregations supported that, supported deporting these people who had entered the country illegally, had committed other crimes, and already been ordered by a judge to be deported. Those were the targets last weekend. When they were told the truth of what the Trump administration is trying to do, they said, we agree with you.
They're just enforcing the law.
Just enforcing the law. But the Democrats are very good at trying to instill fear, and they do that through telling mistruths, through telling lies. All right, I think we have time for one more call. Let's go back to Texas and Ray. Ray, go ahead.
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to make a point about what you said about the mainline media. They wouldn't know a fact if it hit them in the back of the head. And then there again, and the four horsewomen of the apocalypse, as they're called, they should be charged with treason.
Well,
because of the way that they're fighting our country. Because Donald has done more for this country in the few years that he's been in there than anybody has since I've been voting, and I'm 58 years old.
Yeah. Well, he is trying, and I know even in the some in the evangelical community have been fighting him. But you know what? What I appreciate about him, while I don't always appreciate the way he expresses himself, I will say that, and I don't think we should make excuses, even though we support. He is consistent in what he promised the American people he wanted to do. He has not backed away from one part of his platform. He wanted to reduce taxes. He did that. He wanted to improve taxes for corporations so they would move back here and create jobs. He has done that. He wanted to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. He has done that. Very interesting. One of my colleagues was telling me some of the Democrat candidates for president have been asked whether they would move that embassy from Jerusalem back to Tel Aviv. Guess what? No, I don't think we would do that. Oh. That tells you something. The president, what he's doing, he's trying his best to abide by the things that he said he would do and why the American people elected him. We'll have to wait and see, but I'll tell you what, we need to continue at the very least, whether you agree or disagree with everything that he does, continue to pray for him, because I've never seen a president under the kind of pressure that he is under and the opposition that he's facing. But you know what? He is the man that God has put in place for now in this country, and we need to certainly be praying for him. All right, been a pleasure to be with you today. We appreciate you listening. Stay tuned. Much more great programming here on American Family Radio. God bless and have yourself a great rest of the day.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
faith, family, freedom. American